Hello, everyone. My name is John Chan from 2X Growth Agency, and you're listening to the S.M.E Stories Podcast.
You are now listening to the next great small business podcast. Welcome to the S.M.E Stories Podcast, where it is all about small businesses in Canada. And here's your host, Ken Alfred.
Hey, Bert, thanks for on the show. We got a great episode today with John Chan. Now, John Chan is the owner of 2X Growth Agency. John Chan is an entrepreneur with a passion for user experience design and a wide range of interests that makes him a true polymath. At the young age of 19, John dropped out of university to start his own web design consultancy, which led him to work for companies like UBC and Basecamp before fully transitioning into entrepreneurship. Throughout his career, John started 3 businesses, each showcasing his diverse skill set and experience. His latest venture, 2X Growth Agency, is a digital marketing agency that specializes in helping e-commerce and direct-to-consumer brands grow and scale with paid ads and ad creative development. Despite his busy schedule as an entrepreneur, John also invests in real estate with a portfolio of 4 properties, having sold 3. He's also a black belt in Taekwondo and has been training in the sport since he was 6 years old, representing Team Canada 3 times internationally. 2X Growth Agency, under John's leadership, has managed over $6 million of ad spend and helped generate over $30 million in revenue for their clients. All right, so we're going to have a great episode today with John Chan from 2X Growth Agency, so sit back and absorb. All right, guys, we have John Chan from 2X Growth Agency. 2X Growth Agency. Got that right, John?
That's it. Nailed it.
Okay, perfect. So how you doing, John? Thanks for coming on the show.
Ken, thanks for having me. This is very excited to be here.
Oh, that's perfect. So, we were just chatting a little bit briefly there. So where are you located right now? You are in?
I'm in Vancouver. So technically,
Vancouver.
I'm in Richmond. So I'm in 10 minutes away from the airport, if you're familiar. But born in Hong Kong, raised in Vancouver.
Nice. My brother and sister-in-law are in Vancouver right now. They're in North Van, right? So I'll be seeing them in this coming week. Actually, we're actually going to be going to Japan this coming Friday for 3 weeks.
Oh,
so that's going to be
super fun. Sorry, and where you're based?
I am based in Ajax, Ontario, Canada, so east of Toronto.
Got it.
So for our U.S. listeners, they have no clue the hell where Ajax is, but that's okay, right?
They can Google it.
For Canadians, we know exactly. So, all right. So, John Chan, 2X Growth Agency. What's your story?
Sure. So I guess for me, it started off when I dropped out when I was 19. I grew up wanting to be an animator. I was good at drawing. I was good at arts. But as I got older, I'm the youngest of 3 boys. And so my 2 older brothers were engineers. My dad was a teacher. And for me, growing up, I wanted to be an animator, and I didn't really think I wanted to be in entrepreneurship or start a business. But one of the I guess pivotal moments for me was I saw that your family also does martial arts. I did too. My family is put into Taekwondo, and we competed for many years. We went to Worlds, we went to Nationals, and in one of those sort of like chance competitions that I went to, one of my teammates was reading this book, Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I looked over and I was asking him, "Oh, what's that about?" And he told me about this whole thing. And around that time, I was 18, flying into Montreal for a competition. And he was telling me about this notion around, starting your own business or getting out of the rat race or that kind of thing. And he just gave me a very high level type of thing, but I didn't really get that deeply into it. But on a separate trip to a Korea Open in September, 2006, I picked up the book, I read the book, and I came back. I would have been in my second year in university, and I decided right then and there that school was not for me, and I was going to drop out. And I started my first freelancing business around that time to do web development design. And fast forward, we're 15 years in. I've been running different businesses of different sorts, on and off. I took full-time roles, but I've come to terms with the fact that running and starting my own business was something that I really deeply enjoyed, and it got to the point where I could not do it. It's not for the faint of heart, so I don't recommend it as dogmatic as I used to anymore, but it's something that I deeply resonate with.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're a serial entrepreneur, right? So give the listeners a little bit of a few of the businesses that you've started in the past and how it evolved all the way to 2X.
It's funny. I wouldn't self-identify as a serial entrepreneur, but technically that could be true in the sense that I would try a bunch of different things. But the punchline is a lot of them didn't work out, right? That's why you end up being a serial entrepreneur. But I think, if you look at the career history, there was 3 major arcs. So I went back to, starting freelancing business as I was 19. I guess the first lesson there and that was my first business, was I recognized fairly quickly that even though I had the technical skills from high school to build websites. The mechanics of running and starting a business, of knowing how to do project management and do sales and just do the things that are not web design related, quickly showed up, and it meant that I had different skills I needed to learn. And so, shortly after that, I took a full time role at the University of British Columbia. Started off as a web assistant, doing sort of internal like maintenance work, and doing help desk, answering phone calls, and doing support, to becoming eventually their user experience lead and designing. Basically redesigning a lot of their major portals. But along the way, I kept buying and trying different things. So I think one of my very first businesses, I probably would have started a bunch of things I've forgotten, but I probably, one of my first businesses was probably, I bought a website off a website called Flipper.com for $2,000. I remember sending my first $2,000 check to some guy in Vietnam, to run advertising on it. So it's basically a blog that built tutorials. But following the advice that I read from different books earlier, I wanted to systemize that idea of like figure out how to find writers and do management for that, and it gave me a safe sort of playground to test and practice my design skills at the same time. So I think that was probably my very first business where I had regular checks coming in. It wasn't a very big business, but it was one of those things that was very pivotal for me. But other businesses that I would have probably started and stopped was I probably attempted multiple times doing selling T-shirts or selling iPhone cases. A lot of them didn't really go anywhere. Other interesting ones would have been maybe buying another site to for a while. I sold like background checks, and not because I care about the background check portion of the app, but understanding how to do conversion optimization of improving different aspects of the funnel. So I bought a lot of odd businesses like that. And probably the more consistent thing, though, as I'm doing stuff on the web and web related things, was I remember, probably around like 2010 or so, I had a mentor of mine. As I'm developing my career in web and tech and what have you, I had a mentor of mine teach me about finance and about how to buy property. So for a while, I had a side hustle, if you will, of buying and maintaining real estate. And so we are based in BC, in Vancouver. So we bought apartment out here to do a short term rental back then for Airbnbs. We bought a single town, like a single family home out in Chilliwack, which is about an hour like east of the Vancouver core. And then we bought duplexes in Windsor, Ontario, and a fourplex in Windsor, Ontario. And so most of those have been divested now, because with the intention of going back into the market of buying a larger portfolio. So same amount of work, but just maybe like 12 units and up or 8 units and up, as opposed to dealing with all the smaller headaches. So that's probably like a persistent side hustle that I'll probably maintain and keep. But fast forward to today, I guess, all the small businesses aside, our core bread and butter is we're a performance marketing agency. So 2X is a performance marketing agency. We started in 2016. And the premise of it is that we're very good at understanding product, tech, and design. It's kind of the history of where I come from. But at the time, I didn't understand user acquisition or how to do distribution for products and services. And so learning that process of consulting for different brands gave us a lot of exposure for established businesses, did really well with marketing, and then we basically tagged along and figured out how to grow it even further. And so that's kind of like our bread and butter today.
Wow. So it's a very interesting history that you had there, John. So you had all these different side hustles and side businesses. And I'll tell listeners, to those who don't remember, one of my first side hustles was I used to, when I was Taekwondo, actually, when I would actually
Hey.
teach family and friends. And, I would charge by the lesson. I'd teach my younger cousins or the younger kids. And then I had, believe this or not, John, a lifetime deal where if they paid me, and I was only like, what, 10? So I would say if they paid me $25, then their kid would get a lifetime of training from me for the entire time. So
That's a fantastic deal.
that was my first business. And the funny thing is too, I think some listeners forget in my journey, I actually did Amway, like a multi-level marketing company, right?
Yeah,
And the funny thing is, a lot of people talk really bad about certain things, and yeah, there's some
sure.
problems with it. I actually had a good experience because all I did was, because I didn't look at the recruiting aspects. For those who don't remember, there's multi-level marketing. There's it's almost like you're incentivized to bring in people into the business,
For sure.
right? So yes, there's a product or service that you sell that yes, you charge wholesale. Sorry, you pay wholesale, you charge retail, you pocket the difference. But the big money it is getting more people added to what you call your downline, so that
Right.
every sale they make flows up to you, so you get more of a cut. I
Yep.
never really looked at the recruiting. I literally just did wholesale retail. That I even sold my late grandmother one of the first digital cameras that was ever on sale. Now, this digital camera, John, I'm not to date myself. Now, if you think of digital cameras now, a lot of us think it's really old, right? Because who needs an
Sure.
actual camera that you can see a picture? My digital camera, the only way you could look at it is by plugging it into the TV manually through
Hmm.
the video audio port. That's the only way you could look at it. You cannot download it. You couldn't pull the card out. It was literally that. It was at $899.
Oh wow,
My late grandmother bought that. So,
that's so cool.
and when I sold different things to family and friends, well, all these different products, I had a secret weapon in my back pocket. You know what that was?
What?
I had my accounts receivable department. Mom, go after any family that owes me money. She
That's
said, "Hey,
funny.
and sold you this. Pay him." That's all my mom had to say, and then I would do it. So that
You
was
learn
a very
collections
funny
at a very young age.
learn collect exactly. So when in doubt, just stick my mom at them. That's all they have to really
That's
do.
so funny.
So,
No, that's so funny you say that because you actually brought back memories of like me doing those things too. Because I did tutoring, I did like teaching stuff on the side. I also got exposed to like multi-level marketing sort of like business models, and I didn't get that deep into it, but I was exposed to Amway. We did USANA, but it was interesting.
well, yeah, I mean, the products themselves were not just bad. So sometimes part of me wondered, like, why don't you guys just do a regular distribution channel and just put it in stores or have your own stores or just buy it online? What's with the recruiting? I know they need to do the recruiting, but the products themselves weren't that bad. They might be slightly on the premium side of expensive, but
Sure,
I always think the market will determine how good it really is,
for
right?
sure.
So, but anyway, so back to you. So, how big is your current team right now?
We're probably, ooh, I think we're probably eight. So we've had teams fluctuate, but we're probably four full time and a bunch of contractors and part timers. We've also changed our recruiting model a little bit recently. So it used to be that we would have more full time staff on board, but being an agency where we had fulfillment fluctuates, we lean more on contractors and subcontractors. So we have sub agencies effectively that work for us that basically take care of a certain department. So rather than hiring video producers and content editors, we'll basically have an entire team dedicated to that. And we recently brought on another team that's effectively for their marketing generalist team, so they can be assigned a lot of like technical work like analytics work or design reviews or those type of things, but we primarily wanted them to focus on just design and development, where we produce the initial brief about the direction of what we needed produced. And so I think team size wise, I would say maybe like eight, maybe like 10. It fluctuates depending on the seasonality of the business.
Oh, nice. So yeah, it's good to you want to. I think for most people, you got to really start lean, anyways, right? Like, I think the challenge that some entrepreneurs have is they want to hire too much or outsource too quickly. I think you got to be very, very careful with that because that cash outflow is going to be huge in the beginning. Now, don't get me wrong, it's fun to buy stuff for your business, whatever it is, whether it's technology products or maybe this new software or this new application that is supposed to make your life so much easier. But just be very careful with, spending so much money up front, especially if you don't have a good product or good service really defined and how you're going to do it and who's your ideal client market as well, right? I think you got to be
No,
careful with that.
absolutely, and we definitely be caught on the like over hiring side of things, especially in our world where where we do client intake. We basically have to pace and match the fulfillment cycles with sales and delivery, and you have to anticipate before it shows up. So it was trying to figure out how to match that. But I think one of the things that we made that easier for ourselves was when we outsourced some of the hires, where when we again using contractors basically made that fulfillment easier to manage, where we can scale up and scale down. I think eventually we probably want more full time staff and dedicated hires, largely because culturally it's a little bit different to have people that we feel that can fully dedicate to the work that we're trying to do, to learn more about the different aspects of the business. We could help with career progressions and development. So I think it doesn't really beat that trade off. But for the time being, we've figured out our sweet spot in hiring and fulfillment that allows us to be flexible for the upcoming demands that we have.
Nice, nice. So John, what is your, I guess, your plan then for how are you going to grow this even more? Like, what is your plan over the next 5 years for in terms of expansion?
For sure. I mean, the biggest thing about our business right now is that we used to, for the agency model, we've changed our pricing model like multiple times. And so initially, if you look at the official company name, it wasn't 2X Growth Agency, it's 2X Conversion Design. And so, because when we first started the marketing agency, we started off doing consulting for what's called split testing, where we do a redesign of a particular page, like a sales page or a checkout page or a home page, and we would send traffic to both locations and see which one performed better, right? Coming from that design background. And the service model for that was a flat retainer of like a few $1,000s per month, right? I think it was like 5,000 or 3,000. I can't remember exactly. And what we quickly found out was that for that type of work, where we charged a flat monthly retainer, we were effectively designing ourselves out of that sort of pricing model. When we had success for our clients, then it was more harder to do future tests to continue wins, whereas losing tests didn't feel like they were worth growing. And so the punchline to that story is that the pricing model really shapes our growth. And back then we had started with a model that didn't quite work out really well. And so nowadays, when we do our services model for media buying and advertising, it's charged based on a percentage of ad spend. And so we can basically grow our business by bringing in more clients or being more selective with the different brands that we take on, to make sure that we can allow ourselves to grow alongside with the brand, because it's a larger market that they can grow into, and we have a pricing model that is suitable for within it. And so rev share models we really like. Then we have to figure a model that works well within that, and that pretty much works well with lead gen businesses. And we have a few businesses in our portfolio right now that is poised for growth in that world. And then for e-commerce businesses, which is the other type of business we work closely with, we charge on a percentage of ad spend. So, rather than focusing on getting more and more clients, which, is, we need some focus on making sure new ones come in as old ones churn out and their natural cycles, but largely focusing on doing our work better to make sure that we can grow brands profitably and then grow alongside with them in a sustainable way is really our big focus. And so being good at what we do, building our fulfillment model, and making sure that we have the skill sets that touch on every touch point for a marketing campaign is how we plan on growing our business. And I think just doing that, we can grow a very decent business.
So how big do you think you actually get? Like, so you have like 8 employees now. Like, how big are you thinking that this can grow over the next 5 years? You think you can
Yeah,
get to like 50 or 100 employees? Are you going to get a physical location, like old school stuff, or is it going to be more remote?
I think we're going to say remote. I think there's a lot of advantage of being a remote and distributed team, especially for advertising accounts that are, they don't sleep, they don't take pauses. And so having a distributed team that can manage the account from different time zones is a competitive advantage. Being able to manage culturally a remote and distributed team, I think, is also an advantage than hiring in a specific geographic region, both from like talent arbitrage, but also from like a larger talent pool to access from. But I think culturally, from a perspective of who in terms of thinking of my own management style, I don't think I want a large team reporting to me. So I don't see myself growing a team larger than 20, with the exception that if we do, that we actually have a leader within the organization that people can grow within. And so one of the brands that we work closely with, for example, is a 150 or maybe like 180 or so like organization. I don't see myself running an organization of that size. But the way that they build up the management, and that I find really intriguing, is that they effectively built an entire business underneath like one of their CTOs, right? So they have an engineering firm, a software development firm built under CTO, and it's like a separate business that's within their parent organization. And so the exec
Mm.
team that's mostly based in North America are, maybe like the exec team's about 5 people, and then the directors and the rest of the staff here maybe like maybe a headcount of like 15. I can see an organization structuring in that way would be very effective, and it's not conventional, but I think it will be an interesting way to move forward. And it's kind of suitable for times too, right, where people are suitable for and accustomed to working remotely. And the agency business can go fairly large, and they have decent multiples if we do plan on selling the business. We don't know what our current plans are. It's a family business. We like the business. We there's a lot of things we like about the current business. But it's not unheard of that you do tens of millions of dollars in annual sales with enterprise values that if you do plan on selling your business for like 8 or 9 figures. So those are always in the
Well,
cards,
yeah,
although we don't know where we're going to end up.
yeah. It's funny you mentioned, because I just had like on the next episode that's going to be maybe in a few weeks from now, is that one of the guests that I had was her family, her business actually deals with family businesses, especially when it comes to succession planning
Mm,
and all that sort of stuff. So, multi-generational businesses moving from the founder to the next level to the next. So, when that comes out, listeners definitely listen to that one. That was a very interesting episode where they really talk about how most people generally, when they start their business, they don't plan on the exit strategy. For the most
mm,
part, they're doing it to make a few extra bucks here and there. Yeah, maybe do it full time, but then they kind of want to keep it maybe just to themselves. And then, like I mentioned in that episode too, is that in my wife's case, like her parents grew this really big company in Hong Kong
mm,
that unfortunately none of the daughters want to take over the business. So,
right,
what are they going to do? Right.
right.
So, it's going to be interesting. But,
Yeah, for
anyways,
sure.
back to you there, John. So we talked about what your plan for expansion. So when you first started your firm, what were your biggest cost drivers that really started, and where do you see your current cost drivers right now? What seems to be driving it up right now?
I mean, agencies are mostly a people business, and I think the lucky thing is like most of the time, if you have the skill sets, you just need a laptop and a fast internet connection. So I think there was not a lot of cost drivers that made it really easy to start, and that's also why you see there's a lot of low barrier to entry to starting freelancing and consulting businesses. Once you basically have a certain history or track record to do said work, and so realistically, there was not a lot of cost drivers. I mean, we do have certain like operating costs, and for a while we had an office before the pandemic where we needed like a physical presence, one to establish some legitimacy and instead of like working from home and just as we like larger clients what were they kind of wanted to see that kind of thing. But that's no longer the case. So I would say that our current fixed costs right now are probably roughly within maybe like 15 to 20% of our OPEX. And then our staffing is where most of the majority would go in. And so on a smaller agency like ours, like 8 to 15 people, I would say, I think it's somewhat standard for margins to be about 50% of what it roughly is. So in terms of OPEX and staffing, sometimes it's a little bit higher depending on, the size of the accounts that you have. And as the accounts grow, we're probably looking to bring that down to closer to like 30%. And so I think it's a fairly like if it's a good business in that sense where you have appropriately fixed costs to the size of the business. But I think initially when we started, that was probably one of the biggest drivers. But when we started hiring, that was the case. But before that, when you're just between myself and my I work with my wife, so my co-founder, like there was no other fixed costs other than our own living expenses.
Right. No, exactly. And just to backtrack some of the listeners, when he's saying OPEX, he's referring to operation expenses, right? So just the
Correct.
day-to-day stuff that you would see versus CapEx or like capital expenditures. Obviously, if you're doing the new roof, paving a parking lot, those are the bigger expenses. So he's talking about from the daily expenses that he's seeing. So okay, no,
Correct.
that's perfect. So now, obviously, you're an agency. You focus a lot, on social media. What are your biggest? How important is social media to your business right now, and what tools do you currently use?
So it's interesting because we actually don't use social media marketing to promote our business all that much. So part of the interest in doing these podcasts is actually having sound bites and clips where because I find that I'm better on camera and on voice than I am in written form. So it takes me a long time to write certain things down. But on camera, as I'm talking through sort of different answers and explained ideas and concepts to people, uh, it helps you work through the ideas like fairly quickly. And so social media marketing for our own agency, not so much. We have some online presence where we have content that we're putting out on a regular basis. But realistically, social media is around helping and understanding that channel for helping our clients build their distribution. And so if you look at our marketing website, you'll see a lot of ad creatives that we have produced. And so that's basically our bread and butter where we produce thumb stopping ad creatives that help people understand the product from the initial contact to all the way to sales. And we do that in a very efficient and fairly effective manner. And so being able to do that and translate that for different types of products, for consumer e-commerce products to B2B types of services, it's a really big part of that type of work, largely because that's where a lot of consumers are nowadays, right? And so from an advertising world, we have two sort of very big uh, channels and options that we use, right? Primarily, it's paid social, where you have, Meta, Instagram, TikTok, those type of things where people browse on their downtime, and we introduce our products and services through that means. Versus demand capture, where people are going for Google search and they're looking for a product or company specifically, and then getting our products and getting our sites to show up for that, and getting visitors and leads to convert in that manner. And then those are the two biggest channels, but social is definitely a really big aspect of where the world's headed, and we're definitely a part of that.
Yeah, it's a funny thing too. When I first started my business many years ago, is that I was thinking, all right, I'm going through trying to get Google ads and Facebook ads and Instagram ads. I was like, oh man, I think I got to promote Facebook. I'm like, oh man, their fees are too high. You know what? Screw Facebook. I'm gonna go to Instagram.
Same company.
Pretty much the same company. So didn't they were getting my money either way. So it's funny when you learn about these things because I know from a lot of the other owners that I speak to is that we're social media inept. I mean,
Mhm.
we're users of it, we're consumers of it, but we have from a business side, we have no clue what to really do.
Mhm.
That's why I hired a social media person to come up with this stuff because I'm not good at this stuff. Like I'm good in, like you said, in front of the camera, on the microphone, and stuff like that. But in terms of like marketing the media portion to it, I got no clue at all. So I trust my editor, my social media manager. Shout out to you, Leah. Is to actually really go into finding these episodes, finding like really cool things about that we do in a recording, and just post it on social media to help get interest in the actual episode. So that's pretty cool. So, all right, we're gonna ask about questions about the industry now. So John, like you've been in this game for a while, actually. So, what do you see as the advertising industry? What do you think its current state is, and where do you think it's going?
Mm. So historically, the advertising industry has always been that you start off with every new introduction of an ad platform. You have a lot of early adopters, and you have cheap, basically auction mechanics. So all of these ad platforms are based on auctions. And so if you look at Google Ads in the early 2000s, where I wasn't really a participant at that point, you see a lot of new businesses that emerge largely because um, running advertising in those platforms, you paid a few cents per click, and that allowed a lot of businesses to thrive, to get easy access to markets and market shares. And it was a lot of the same sort of mechanics that people individually suffered, where they were like, well, I didn't quite understand the mechanics of it, so do I like jump into it to get understanding of it or now or not? And we saw the same thing happen with social media maybe like 5 or 10 years ago. It was kind of like the heyday of social media advertising, when people were still not fully certain about what is this thing, is this real, and we saw that sort of cheap mechanics of that platform. So nowadays, I think the biggest drivers and change has shifted in the sense that both platforms have matured to the point where people know that it's going to be a really important thing. It's going to stay. We don't necessarily know if there's a new entrant that's coming abroad, and so some people had high hopes for like things like TikTok or alternative ad platforms. And so platforms wise, we don't really see a lot of new entrants per se, but what's changed within it is that it's gotten harder in that the ad platforms have gotten more expensive. So last week, for example, the Department of Justice in the United States have just filed a ruling that Google was deemed to be a monopoly. And within that 236-page report of the statement of facts and their findings, you'll see that Google self-admittedly that they'll admit that there is still a higher ceiling that consumers or advertisers are willing to pay within those platforms. So my expectation for ad platforms is somewhat bleak in that sense, that I would imagine that it would get more and more expensive, and it kind of like squeezing the margins of businesses. And so, but on the flip side, what made the advertising industry easier to work with in some ways is the advent of AI, with the new content creation and production, and also in terms of hiring. A lot of costs of production on managing and maintaining advertising campaigns have gotten down. And you'll see this again within ad platforms, that a lot of campaigns are shifting to a programmatic management, where before you used to do a lot of manual adjustments, so making improvements and optimizations, and you introduce a lot of human error. Some of that has been taken away, for better and for worse, where it's opted and given to the machine. So understanding how machines work, I think, is now a competitive advantage. Understanding how AI works is also a competitive advantage. And being early adopters in both, you see that translated in a rising costing environment in ad platforms, is the lower of production of campaign management and fulfillment. So I think those things are happening in the industry, which is why from our agency perspective, I think for my own development and also our staff development, I think of the two areas that it's really important to focus on is the fundamentals of marketing. So for example, if advertising and direct response marketing hasn't changed for the last 30, 50 years because of human psychology and consumer behaviors haven't changed, understanding and studying those fundamentals is still going to be useful 5 or 10 or 15 years from now. That's likely not going to change. But what's going to change is the technology. And so staying on top of different, not all the different trends, but at least having a functional understanding of generative AI, or understanding how to use better prompts for the work that you do, I think is a very important endeavor, and it's akin to seeing the internet emerge in the early 2000s and how AI would impact the world in the next 10 or 15 years.
Well, yeah, I think you brought up a lot of good points in terms of technology and everything that's going on because, I remember one of my business that I thought of doing, but I never did. And I'm kind of glad I didn't do it. This just to set the story up. I think some of the listeners might remember this. So this is probably back in, let's say, the early 2000s, where I thought, okay, I just noticed that a lot of people, I think, it would be a great opportunity. Is like what I see all these people having to write things down in terms of, man, I have to remind myself to do this, that, and the other. And I got all these errands that I have to run, like the honey to-do list, all that sort of stuff. Wouldn't it be cool if we had a reminder service? If there's like a pronto reminder services or something like that, where at that time I thought, okay, where what we do is you give us all your contact info from your phone numbers, your, I guess, email addresses, and we basically are going to be like your VA almost in a way, just to say, hey, don't forget you have to pick up groceries later on today. Oh, you got an appointment here, this, that, and the other. And I was thinking of, okay, we can do like a monthly fee, all this sort of thing. The next thing we hear about it, John, I think the BlackBerry and the iPhone came out.
Of course.
Totally would have killed the business. So there's no way it could have worked at that time because we were literally contacting people. Now everyone has
Right.
their own planner and all that sort of stuff. So glad to think about technology, right? So I think everyone
Sure.
has their stuff. I make a joke that if it ain't on the Google Calendar, it ain't happening,
For sure.
right? So that's pretty much what happens for me. So where can people reach out to you?
I'm JTC Chan on Twitter or X and LinkedIn. So you can find, it's gonna be tough because there's a lot of John Chans. But if you look for John Chan 2X, you'll find me. And or you can just reach out on our marketing site. We're at 2x.agency. That's the website URL. And you can always book a call and reach out, even if it's not a business inquiry. So always love to hear from folks.
All right. Well, great. Thanks, John, for being on the episode. It was a lot of fun.
Ken, appreciate it.
Hey you, do you need a voiceover? Well, look no farther. Northway Capital Group has your answer. Commercials and explainer videos, AVR and voicemail, health and wellness, corporate training and e-learning, announcements, documentaries, and biography. Contact us on social media or email us at northwaycapitalgroup@gmail.com. Thank you for listening to the S.M.E Stories podcast, which is owned by Northway Capital Group. Please follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Northway Capital Group.